Hi everyone, I'm Friederike Bahl. I'm a sociologist at the Hamburg Institute for Social Research, and broadly speaking, I specialize in the fields of sociology of work and sociology of law.
My name is Laura Affolter, and I'm a social anthropologist with a focus in legal and political anthropology.
My name is Clemens Boehncke and I'm a sociologist with a special focus on the historical sociology of German legal science.
Hi, I am Fatma Derya Amartis. I work at Hamburg Institute for Social Research as a postdoctoral researcher. I'm a cultural anthropologist by training, and very broadly, I do anthropology of airspace and aviation technologies.
I'm Tobias Eule. I am principal investigator of the research group Sociology of Law, and I'm also professor for the Sociology of Law at the Law School of the University of Bern.
I believe law can be a good lens into fundamental sociological and anthropological issues. I consider law as an infrastructure of society and human culture. I think it's a part of social fabric, and it often interacts with the organization of society, and it mediates collective social behavior. In this sense, I don't think we can isolate specific questions where law can help us find answers. Instead, I believe it is embedded in a high majority of sociological and anthropological questions. In my work, for example, I try to find answers to the questions related to how humans interact with technology and space. I often find myself tracing the intersections of basically law and society.
I'm particularly interested in the way there's a difference, an empirical difference between the way we think of or feel about or fantasize about power and how power plays out kind of in everyday life. And really oversimplified, I think the key difference is that we tend to overestimate the amount of order is related to power, or specifically powerful institutions. So when we think of the state, but also when we think of individual institutions like a court, when we think about forms of creating wealth like capitalism, I think often give it too much credit for its stability and kind of long-term capacity. Because when you look at studies that look deeper into the way these systems work, these kind of institutions actually work, we see a lot of abundance of informal practices, of disorder and kind of improvisation to order something. So the practice of ordering seems to be something that is really important, but something that we don't think about. We don't idealize when we think about, say, the state or specific institutions. And for that reason, I think, we need to look closer at law as a way in which power is established and challenged at the same time. So this dualism already is kind of destabilizing this idea of order. But also because law as a key kind of tool of maintaining power, of kind of redistributing power or wealth, or giving opportunities or taking opportunities away, is something that we often are surprised when it doesn't work, which I in turn find very interesting, because it shouldn't be interesting that migration control doesn't work perfectly if you look at the reality on the ground. It shouldn't be surprising that pursuing economic crime doesn't work particularly well if we look at what's happening on the ground. And it shouldn't be surprising that kind of politics is such a volatile game and can be kind of, the international order can be upset by people like Trump so easily if we look at how international relations actually happens. So what I'm interested in is pursuing a theory of order and disorder that links ideas and fantasies to practices, and that doesn't overestimate order, that doesn't overestimate the stability of power, but rather takes a look at how this is constantly re-established and of the practices of ordering through and with law.
What I I find most interesting about law is not so much the clear-cut cases. So not the things that are perfectly legal or perfectly illegal, and also not so much the institutional setup in different legal traditions or a change in regulation in itself. Rather, I'm interested in all the grey areas in between that come with them. And to give you an idea what I'm talking about, we might see this especially at the intersection of law and capitalism. For example, when we take shadow economy, to pick one topic I'm interested in. When sociologists think about shadow economy, we're often thinking about activities that are outside the regular economy. So that are beyond practices that play by the book, like contract agreements or payment regimes and so on. But with the legal perspective, you get a much richer picture than that. Because a lot of shadow economic practices are actually not illegal at all, or at least not completely. Some might even be perfectly legal or make use of regulatory loopholes, like tax evasion, for example. So there might be a lot of more surprising ways beyond a conservative, conventional understanding of capitalist enterprises. And I think this is where it gets interesting. And another question that goes into these grey areas and in-betweens is what happens when different normative practices or even different normative orders collide? And to give you an example or an idea what I'm talking about, I'm currently working on the question of judicial authority. Is it becoming more or less? Or where is it becoming more and where is it becoming less? Because there we seem to be dealing with at least two conflicting trends. On the one hand, we're talking about a judicialization of politics. So where a lot of politically significant issues are handed to judges for them to decide. So there seems to be more judicial authority. But on the other hand, we're talking about quite the opposite trend as well. We have a lot of private dispute resolution. So where companies like eBay, Amazon or Modria create their own dispute resolution centers and resolve a lot of legal issues on their own, and no judge will ever lay eyes on this. So what's it gonna be? And I think for me, this is where law gets interesting and is tremendously promising for sociological analysis.
The project that I'm working on right now takes a look at the material side of law, that is a peculiar kind of legal literature. I concern myself with the emergence of the legal commentary in Germany during the late 19th and early 20th century as an ever more important medium of juridical discourse. The sociological questions behind this are manifold. For instance, under which historical conditions the publishing landscape within a given scientific field or profession changes, which actors are involved in this, and how those affected by these changes react to them. Can one identify clear incumbents who identify these shifts critically, and others who welcome and drive these developments in the role of challengers? Does this lead to an interprofessional conflict, and how is it staged? How much of these changes come down to autonomous, self-determined decisions, or are certain developments driven by more heteronomous constraints and trends? Are there maybe actor groups outside of the legal field who try to sway these trends with their own passions and interests, and thus these open up new axes of conflict?
For me, law is not just a lens into other social phenomena, that too, of course, but law, or more broadly speaking, normative orders and orientations, are also the very object and focus of my anthropological inquiry. So I'm very interested in understanding such orders, and particularly in processes of norm creation, in understanding how normative change occurs, but also how normative continuity, for instance, is established and maintained. And for this, my focus is not so much on the norms themselves, but more on the kind of struggles and negotiations around them from a bottom-up perspective. So these are negotiations that can take place in very everyday ways or settings, and often also in spaces that we might consider to be outside law, or what we consider to be a legal setting. So for instance, in and through social movements. The contexts in which I'm exploring this are the negotiations over two sets of constitutional rights or principles in Ecuador, so sumac causae or buen vivir, and the rights of nature. And here, two issues are particularly important to me. So one is to explore what being or acting in a decolonial way might mean in these contexts, and to explore these attempts to decolonize law, but then to also look at the obstacles and challenges of such endeavors. But then it also means to critically reflect on my own position and to carefully think about how to write about such issues without committing epistemic violence. The other key issue for me is to explore law's travels and transformations from a very empirical and open perspective, to look at the multiple ways and directions in which this might happen. So to look at how these ideas might not just travel from the global north to the global south, but in what directions this happens, how they are transformed, reiterated, adopted to different settings, how they might gain or lose significance on a global scale.